This video is both a news update of the escalating war in the Middle East involving Israel, Iran, and the United States, and spreading to surrounding Gulf nation states. Oil exports from the region, which supplies most of Europe, Asia, and Africa, have ground to a halt. The Philippines and the country of Kenya have declared national emergencies due to the fuel shortage. Israel has been bombarded with massive missile strikes day after day from both Hezbollah and Iran. Netanyahu and many Israeli military leaders are rumored to be dead in Iran's retaliation strikes. Iran's new supreme leader is said to be dead and hasn't been seen since the announcement of his ascension to the office. Israel and the U.S. assets, such as bases and missile radar detection systems located in Middle East countries, have been bombed and destroyed. These are just some of the news updates on the war as of March 25th, 2026. We will have our news clips first, then get into how prophecy is being fulfilled right before our eyes. Let's get started.
זה הזירה, פה, רמת שלמה פה, כניסה לרמת שלמה פה, הנה הפר, הרכב, כולם בסדר, אחד יצא, הנה הפיר.
For those of you who are just listening, we are looking at videos of extensive damage to territories all throughout the state of Israel in multiple cities and districts.
If you see the images of this missile coming in, you can see that it is a very large missile with many submunitions. And one of the missiles Iran has used is the Khorramshahr missile, which can carry up to 80 of those smaller bomblets. I do want to show you a little bit more of some of the damage here, because in addition to that balcony, there is also this area on the floor here where you can see bits of concrete, a damaged scooter, damaged vehicles around here, all of this from just one of those small bomblets. And so consider the fact that there could be up to 80 of those falling indiscriminately over multiple miles in this Tel Aviv area. The Iranians showing that despite how much Israel has degraded their ballistic missile capabilities, they're finding new ways, including through the use of these cluster munitions, to get through Israel's air defenses and cause damage, and also tonight, fatalities.
פה בשוקולוב חולון, פגיעה ישירה, אוטובוס! אני לא מאמין, 10 מטר! וואי.
וואי, כמה? אלוהים.
Let's look at the latest battlefield updates. Iran fired more missile barrages overnight. Some of them carried cluster warheads. And as the name suggests, these are not single munitions. They explode into multiple bomblets. It's not clear how many of these were shot down. Now, these cluster bombs spread over a larger target area. They also drain Israeli air defenses. One of the missiles appears to have hit a power station, Orot Rabin, located along the Israeli coast, which brings us to the strikes on Iran. The US military continues to target mobile missile launchers. They've released footage of the latest strikes. In total, the US claims to have destroyed 9,000 targets in Iran. These targets could be anything. Missile launchers are targets, warships are targets, and drone-making facilities are targets. Put together, the US claims to have destroyed 9,000 of them.
Every American base in the region has been hit. Even the American air base at Incirlik in Turkey has been struck. All of these bases have been rendered unusable by us. Whether they are seaports or airfields, it doesn't make any difference. So Iran has done really a spectacular job of simultaneously attacking all of these critical bases very early on. And finally, remember, this is probably going to go on for weeks or months unless someone sobers up in Washington. But the thing that will decide this outcome is logistics. We simply don't have enough missiles on hand, and we have a very long line of communications that takes us all the way back to the United States. We've lost most of the ports, virtually all of them in the region, that we would normally use to reload ships, reload missiles, reprovision our forces. We don't have an end state in mind. There is no off-ramp. The conditions that we demanded, which were really Israel's conditions from Iran, could not be met. Every American base in the
Most important military facility on Israel's northern border, Dadobus, in the city of Safed. This is the headquarters of the Israel's Northern Command. Every troop rotation into southern Lebanon, every artillery order, every defensive position against Hezbollah runs through this one building. In the same wave, missiles hit Tel Aviv, Bnei Brak, and Kiryat Shmona. Iran claims 4 American military bases across 3 countries were struck in the same salvo. This was Wave 80 of Operation True Promise 4. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how Iran's cluster warheads have broken Israel's air defense and why the cost of stopping each missile is becoming more dangerous than the missiles themselves. Now, here is what we know. On March 17th, Israel launched a fresh ground invasion into southern Lebanon. That entire ground campaign is run out of Dado Base. 2 frontline combat divisions operate under its direct command, armored units on the Golan Heights, territorial defense forces stationed right on the Lebanese border. All of it funnels through Safed. When the IRG-SEEK described this target as the facility responsible for commanding and deploying forces along the northern borders, that was not exaggeration. That was a precise description of what this base does every single day. So why does that matter right now? Because Israel is not just defending its northern border. It is occupying new territory. Defense Minister Israel Katz stated that Israel intends to hold a security zone all the way up to the Litani River until Hezbollah is eliminated. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich went further. He called for the Litani to become Israel's permanent northern border. That is not a defensive posture. That is an expansion. And Iran just put missiles directly into the command center running it. This is no longer a one-front war. Iran is firing from the east. Hezbollah is launching rockets from the north. Continuous air raid sirens have been sounding across northern Israel. At least 1 woman has been killed in those attacks. Gaza remains unresolved in the south. 3 active fronts. 1 command center just took direct fire. We need to talk about the specific weapons used in this wave, because this is where the technical reality diverges sharply from the headlines. The Sejil is a 2-stage, solid-fuel, intermediate-range ballistic missile. It stretches roughly 17.5 meters long, weighs approximately 23 tons, and delivers a warhead between 500 kilograms and 1 ton. Its range reaches 2,000 to 2,500 kilometers. Iran claims it can reach Tel Aviv from the city of Natanz in under 7 minutes. The solid fuel propulsion is the detail that matters most. Unlike liquid fuel systems that need extended fueling on the launch pad, exposing them to satellite detection and preemptive strikes. The Sedgel fires from road mobile launchers with almost no preparation window. It climbs on a ballistic arc, exits the atmosphere, then re-enters at hypersonic speed. That re-entry profile makes it exceptionally difficult for ground-based defense networks to track and destroy during terminal descent. The Khorramshahr, designated K-bar in its newest variant, the Khorramshahr 4, is a different weapon entirely. It is liquid-fueled, roughly 13 meters for the motor section, plus 4 meters for the warhead, with a launch weight between 19,000 and 26,000 kilograms. It carries the heaviest payload in Iran's confirmed arsenal, between 1,500 and 1,800 kilograms. The Khorramshahr 4 uses an advanced Arvand engine running on hypergolic fuel that can sit in storage tanks for years, cutting launch preparation to approximately 12 minutes. It also carries a mid-course navigation system that corrects trajectory outside the atmosphere, which means electronic warfare jamming during terminal guidance does not work against it. But the capability that is reshaping this entire conflict is what it carries inside. The Khorramshahr can be fitted with a cluster warhead containing up to 80 individual submunitions. And that single feature has broken the fundamental logic of Israeli air defense.
Today is March 21st, Saturday, the Sabbath, 2026. And today we're going to talk about current events and how they are intersecting with prophecy. In short, we have seen a lot of markers take place that we know from the Bible and its inspired interpretation, as has been declared by the prophets. We've seen these markers happen only very recently. So today we are going to go through the prophetic timeline of last day events in an effort to give people a better understanding of exactly where we are and how much time we may have. Now, I'm not time setting or date setting. This is simply to let you know how close we are to the separation and the judgment of the living, which starts with the Church of God. We will methodically go through scripture and statements in the spirit of prophecy to prove this. Of interest, and what will be covered in this presentation, are the timeline for the Confederacy. We're talking about the Confederacy of Isaiah 8, the last World War, World War III, or World War II resumed, the coalition, and current locations in the state of Israel that are getting bombed, decimated, and destroyed. These current events are important to review as they are referenced in the inspired interpretation of the Bible. The first thing that we will deal with in the timeline of the end is the Confederacy of Isaiah 8. Really, this is the first thing that must happen if we take all that is written on it into consideration. So we're looking at the quote, 13 symbolic code, numbers 3 and 4, starting with page 8. It says, if God's people are approaching the time when they must either confederate or sacrifice their lives, they must be developing the faith which will cause them to believe that in those days men shall seek death and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. Revelation 9:6. Isaiah 8:14 says,
and he shall be for a sanctuary, but for a stone of stumbling, and for a rock of offense to both the houses of Israel, for a gin and for a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem.
A sanctuary is a place of refuge. Besides being a place of refuge to God's faithful ones, he is also to be a rock of offense to both houses of Israel, Judah and Israel, and a gin and a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Now, in history, Jerusalem, ancient Israelite history, Jerusalem was the ruling city of Judah. Remember that the tribes were split into 2 kingdoms. From this, it is plain that through this confederacy, God is to be a gin and snare to antitypical Judah. God calls the Christian church Judah in the last days. More specifically, the Seventh-day Adventist Church, Judah, because in the Christian dispensation, there is a split as well. that is, through the other Protestant churches and the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The thing that caused the split is the restoration of the Sabbath and the sanctuary truth. That's what sets apart Adventist Christians from other Protestant Christians. And we've discussed this many times, that the Protestants have kind of fell away from their original message. And instead, they are known as evangelicals. They're coming together on common points of doctrine in order to make their church-state confederacy. Isaiah 8:15 says,
"And many among them shall stumble and fall and be broken and be snared and be taken."
This prophecy declares that the confederacy will be a snare, a trap, and that many will fall and be taken in it. It will be a fearful trap and will separate God's people. Let me say that again. It will be a fearful trap and will separate God's people. Thus is the Lord going to test all his people and let them reveal just how much faith each of them has. In the face of this warning, we must make the necessary preparation so that we will not fall into the snare. God has clearly forewarned his people so that they will not be taken by surprise. If you're Adventist, many Adventist people I'm seeing, and I talk to many, I'm probably in like 2 or 3 different Adventist forums where there's hundreds of people, and we talk about doctrine, we talk about biblical prophecy, and a lot of them were alarmed when this war started because it was something unexpected. Because what we have been told to look for in the Adventist Church is the reassertion of the Roman Catholic Church, and that is a marker that we look for to know that the end of all things is at hand. But here it says that the Confederacy is a snare and a trap, and that many will fall and be taken in it. Why? Something cannot be a snare and a trap if you're looking for it, right? If you're looking at the snare and the trap and you know it's coming, you will avoid it. So it's something that they don't expect that is going to ensnare and trap them, the unsuspecting. Let me read this again. In the face of this warning, we must make the necessary preparation so that we will not fall into the snare. God has clearly forewarned his people so that they will not be taken by surprise. In Isaiah 24, we are told there would be a shaking as an olive tree, and but few men would be left. Nice. Now, let's read the next references carefully to determine the time of the Confederacy. Many are teaching that there will be no Assyrian Confederacy, but we know this cannot be because of the totality of the teaching on the subject. We will go through the trouble as the storm approaches, and our time of trouble actually comes from our brethren in the church. And guess what? The reason why it comes from them is because they are going to be for this Confederacy. They don't see it as a great evil, and they don't see it as a snare and a trap, but it is. The Confederacy that we are studying this afternoon commences before the loud cry and before the slaughter of Ezekiel 9. It is not the image of the beast, and the image of the beast, happens during the scarlet-colored beast phase. That is an image of either the hornhead beast or the leopard-like beast before its deadly blow was inflicted. This association precedes the image of the beast, and the Confederacy is formed when the nations are girding themselves for war. Put another way, the Confederacy will commence after the sealing and perhaps just before the slaughter of Ezekiel 9. All those who are not expecting the Confederacy, but instead are expecting next the reassertion of Roman church supremacy or the Battle of Armageddon or something else, are going to fall into the snare. For it will appear to them harmless and perhaps even a good thing, but it will be their trap. All those who are not expecting the Confederacy, but instead are expecting the Sunday law, the reassertion of Roman church supremacy, the Pope becoming the top world leader, or the Battle of Armageddon, they're not going to be expecting this Confederacy, and it will appear to them harmless and perhaps even a good thing. Now, this is something that I'm personally working hard to present before members of the church.
A power from beneath is working to bring about the last great scenes in the drama, Satan coming as Christ, and working with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in those who are binding themselves together in secret societies. Those who are yielding to the passion for confederation are working out the plans of the enemy. The cause will be followed by the effect. God will remove his covenant-keeping power from those who in their willfulness refuse to enter into covenant with him. Their choice is to confederate with those who delight in that which he hates, and he permits them to follow their own way, to their destruction. Letter Manuscripts, Volume 17, the year 1902, page 141, paragraph 12.
The reference we just read tells us that the Confederacy commences after the sealing. Let's break that down. Must the sealing be over to fulfill that phrase after the sealing? I would say that the answer is no. To me, that means that the sealing for the living is already in progress. Okay? And we're going to explain a little bit more what that is. We're being investigated right now to see whether we will live up to the righteous principles which we have been given as a church. Now, I need some to understand, because there's some here that are not members of the Adventist Church and don't understand fully the history of the Christian churches. So, to put it in layman's terms, there's two sections of the sealing, okay? One is for people that have the opportunity to learn the truth about the Sabbath, about the sanctuary, and have been members of the church, okay, for an extended period of time. So they fall under one category of people that are to be sealed. The second group is going to be from the other Christian churches. That's part of the great multitude, but then there's also those who will come in from the heathen religion as well, who are also part of the great multitude. So we are being investigated to see whether we will live up to the righteous principles we have been given. If we look at that first part of the reference, it's actually the Confederacy that separates God's people, the church. The prophet declares it will be a fearful trap. It is the final test. Now, what is this separation? It is the separation of the tares from the wheat. Now, we often say when we talk about that parable, the wheat and the tares, the parable of the wheat and the tares. And it almost kind of gives the impression that the wheat will be gathered first. But in the Bible, it's actually the opposite. The parable says that the tares shall be gathered up first and put into bundles to be burned. This denotes that the wicked are raptured from the Seventh-day Adventist Church as declared by the prophet of the Lord, and is strikingly depicted in Ezekiel 9. In one selected messages, page 125, it says, in 1844, our great high priest entered the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary to begin the work of the investigative judgment. The cases of the righteous dead have been passing in review before God. When that work shall be completed, judgment is to be pronounced on the living. And then in Peter it says, if judgment begin at the house of God, what's going to happen to the rest of us? Now, I want you to think about this. How can God pronounce judgment on the living or the dead unless they're investigated? Because when Christ comes, the Bible says he's going to have his reward, okay? And those who are living also have to be investigated. That's the part that we're not catching as a church. So that investigation is called a sealing. That's what the sealing is for. It's for the living. So I'm showing you the steps of what is going to happen to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And that's what leads up to the time that is represented by the parable of the wheat and tares. Now remember, in that parable, while men slept, an enemy came and sowed the tares. So in the church, in every church, there's good and bad. But we're talking specifically about the Church of God in the last days. Okay? So Christ has not stopped anyone from joining the church, and Satan has sown tares. Okay? These are people that are not there because of the Spirit of God has led them into all truth. They don't love the truth. Maybe they're there because they were born into it. Maybe they're there because a friend pressured them to come to church. Maybe they're there because a spouse. Maybe they're just there because they like having a community to socialize with. But we know this church was brought for one thing, and that is to uphold the 10 Commandment law before the world and show people the position that Jesus has and the work that he has as high priest. That means he's going through all the cases of those who are living. He's interceding, he's forgiving sins, and he blots those sins from his book of record. Everyone who has confessed the sins will be retained in the book of life. All those who hold on to their sins and do not confess it and change and truly repent, their names will be blotted out of the book of life. The Bible clearly says that. This is the last period of time in the Adventist church. And what many Adventists are looking for is the Sunday law. And that's all they want to talk about, or the Roman Catholic Church. Looking at what's happening in the world right now, we are wondering, how are we going to get to the point to where our own brethren in the church will turn us into the state authorities? Okay. How are we going to get to the point where we're going to be taken up into a court? And it's going to happen through this last conflict, this war. Once there is an attack of great proportion, perhaps on American soil, we're going to see things rapidly devolve into a more extreme religious state. Now, here in America, we already have a religious state. Okay. Some people may not see it that way just because the pressure is not on them. But we do have people who are actually fighting in the courts and going all the way to the Supreme Court just to exercise their basic rights, because the executive branch has taken the position that they are establishing a religious state. So the Confederacy in the United States is already formed. More on that later. Now we'll get back to the timeline, but first, this is an important quote because it shows that the Confederacy starts within the United States as a localized government, yet we know it is a worldwide power because the United States is found in Revelation 13. It is described as a two-horned beast that comes up as a lamb and eventually speaks as a dragon. And I quote, "The power that is represented by this two-horned beast will identify itself with the false prophet, for together they are cast alive into the lake of fire." Revelation 19:20. From this it is plain to see that the wonders which the beast does in the sight of men, and by which he deceives them that dwell on the earth, Revelation 13, verses 13 and 14, are wrought by the false prophet, which is found in Revelation 19:20. And he does this in the sight of the beast. Who is the beast? The two-horned beast, which represents America. Revelation 13:14. Clearly then, the beast's civil authority combined with the prophet's supernatural power points to a union of beast and prophet, an affiliation of state and of church representatives. Having only 2 horns, not 10, the beast therefore depicts a local, not a universal government. Nevertheless, he will encourage all Christendom to make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live. Okay? Now, it's important to understand, before I go and read this, that there's 2 phases to the 2-horned beast. And I'll try to get in a little bit closer. There's 2 phases to the 2-horned beast. Okay? This is the phase that we're in now. Okay? This is the present world. The leopard-like beast has existed from before the Protestant Reformation. Okay, it begins in 538 AD when the church rises to papal supremacy, and the Roman Catholic Church rules both the church and the state. Okay, and then it also goes through the Protestant Reformation, which is depicted by the deadly wound that this beast gets in the process of existing. So it gets this deadly wound, which is the Protestant Reformation, which was a movement, of course, ordained by God. But what we're going to see in Revelation 13:3 is the healing of the wound, which is the church-state confederacy. It's actually the rise of despotism in the United States first. We can see from that statement that it happens in the United States first. The next thing he does, though, is he will influence all Christendom to make an image to the beast. But that doesn't happen until we get to this time over here. This is the image of the beast. Okay. And at this point, the U.S. has already lost the war in the Holy Land. Okay. So if you want to see where we are in this time, this is exactly where we are. The church-state confederacy has already commenced in the United States. What we have now is an affiliation of church and state officials that are working together and have successfully dismantled the U.S. government. So the 2-horned beast has 2 phases that he operates in. First, he operates as an affiliation of church and state officials. This we have seen as Project 2025 was implemented and has almost completely dismantled the United States government. At this time that this was happening, the nations were girding themselves for war. But the only one who was actively engaged in a war in the Holy Land was Israel and Hamas. Yes, there were powers which were operating in the shadows by proxy, which has been happening for many decades, but we didn't see the nations openly taking a stand for either side, as we are starting to see today. The war between Israel and Hamas started on October 7, 2023. While this recent conflict has blown into a conflict of epic proportions, which will affect the entire world. We will look briefly at why this is happening, but first we need to look at another part that helped fuel the war drastically, and that's the coalition.
Nahum makes clear that in this conflict, God interposes against Assyria, and that as a result, she is unable to withstand him, who dasheth in pieces. Having set himself to humble her, he therefore strengthens the arms of her enemy. Accordingly, Assyria falls, not because she is weak and small, nor because she is outnumbered and outmatched, but because God's purpose determines her downfall. In other words, the coalition which may have the greater resources and manpower, and which from the human point of view may seem sure to win, is in this case sure to lose.
Okay, in times past, I have said that the coalition may be formed after the start of the war, which, depending on how you look at it, it has 3 potential starting points. The war does. We were looking for that coalition because it does say that they are going to build a coalition to win the war, but despite their union, the United States and its allies, will fail to win the war. That was the prediction that was made in the 1930s and 40s. In the past studies, we looked in depth at the conflict between the Palestinians and the state of Israel. We saw that there is definitely a partial fulfillment of Zephaniah 2 as the result of this conflict. And that, of course, was Gaza being forsaken. You know, during the time since October 7th, Gaza has been bombarded and is totally leveled. And it's rare to see a building that's actually still standing. And I've heard that Israel's still bombing Gaza. And also they controlled everything that came into that territory, which they were blocked in on one side by the state of Israel. And on the other side, they have the Mediterranean Sea. So it was very hard to get supplies, gas, medicine, food, water, when all your infrastructure has basically been destroyed. So that's how we knew when we read Zephaniah 2 that talks about the start of this conflict and also what's going to happen in various territories, that was a signpost that had been fulfilled. Gaza is forsaken. So based on the events that have happened, the potential dates for the commencement of World War III or World War II resumed is October 7th, 2023. That was Hamas versus Israel. Or the second potential date, which is June 2025. That was Operation Midnight Hammer. That was a 12-day assault when the United States and Israel worked together in a bombing campaign to neutralize Iran's nuclear capabilities. Okay, that was the first time that the United States had taken an active role publicly instead of fighting a shadow war by proxy directly for Israel in the territory that we know is in the Holy Lands. Now, the third potential date could be February 28th, 2026. The United States and Israel launched a joint large-scale military operation against Iran, and it's now known as Operation Epic Fury. This campaign was initiated to target Iranian missile infrastructure, military sites, and leadership, marking the start of an open, direct conflict between the United States and Iran. So a lot of us know this is the war that's currently ongoing and expanding to a regional war, with more nations becoming actively involved as each day progresses. So if you take a look to the right, this is a picture of the countries that joined the Board of Peace Coalition. Now, the Board of Peace was given authorization by the United Nations, okay? And Trump was named as the head. President Trump was named as the head chair, and he has a lot of power on this board. Trump has come out as one of the strongest presidents in recent years, and a lot of countries flock to join. So this top row right here represents the companies that actually signed the charter and officially joined the Board of Peace. I want you to pay attention to this last section right here. If you notice, Qatar joined, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, United Arab Emirates or UAE, and then Uzbekistan. Also on here is Jordan. Now this is important because what has happened is Iran has extended their bombing campaigns to the countries that joined the Board of Peace in the region. Now, others who just basically expressed an intent to join were Albania, Belarus, Cambodia, Egypt, Kuwait, Vietnam. Now, Kuwait has also been bombed, okay, because it does hold some oil processing manufacturing plants. And then these states down, these nation states down here are just observers. And then some of them have flat out rejected being on the board of peace, like Germany and the UK, which is kind of crazy because Germany and the UK have always been allies. Now, I want to talk about Nahum 1:11, okay? Because if we go to Nahum 1, 2, and 3, when you go to Nahum 1, you will see verse 11, and it says,
"There is one come out of thee that imagineth evil against the Lord, a wicked counselor."
We don't have time to go through every verse in this chapter, but understand that these two verses have directly to do with the war that we are looking at right now. It says,
"For while they be folden together as thorns,
allied together for protection,
and while they are drunken as drunkards,
filled with theories,
they shall be devoured as stubble fully dry."
That means they will lose this war. Let me go to chapter 2.
Nahum chapter 2. "He that dasheth in pieces is come up before thy face. Keep the munition, watch the way, make thy loins strong, fortify thy power mightily."
I'm going to skip to verse 3 because this has to do with the Ezekiel 9 and what's going to happen, how God is going to punish those nations that are marring the Holy Land. That is, they're bombing away, and God still has his eye on that land. But let's go to verse 3.
"The shield of his mighty men is made red. The valiant men are in scarlet. The chariots shall be with flaming torches in the day of his preparation, and the fir trees shall be terribly shaken."
So note here is that this war cannot take place in olden times with the horse and carriage. It says that the chariots shall be with flaming torches in the day of his preparation. And the day of whose preparation? When he that dasheth in pieces is come up before thy face. Now the prophet said that he that dashes in pieces was Hitler. He definitely dashed in pieces and changed the face of Europe through World War II. And it was definitely something that shook the whole world. It says the fir trees shall be terribly shaken. Jesus said when he healed the blind man said, "I see men as trees." So when we let the Bible interpret itself, trees is a symbolization for men or the great leaders of the earth. And number 4, again, tells us and gives us a time period that we can know that this war is going to happen. It says,
"The chariots shall rage in the streets. They shall jostle one against another in the broad ways. They shall seem like torches. They shall run like the lightnings. He shall recount his worthies. They shall stumble in their walk. They shall make haste to the wall thereof, and the defense shall be prepared."
So during World War II, Hitler made a mistake by opening 2 additional fronts, one in North Africa and one in Russia. And because he did that, instead of taking over Great Britain when he had the chance, he turned around. Instead of continuing to defeat them, his siege on Europe would have been complete had he taken Great Britain. And when he opened those 2 additional fronts, he stumbled in his walk. And who made a haste to the wall thereof to prepare? It was the Allies. The defense was prepared by the Allies, and the Allies ended up winning the war. But because Great Britain allied with atheistic Russia, this war is determined to continue. It was not blessed because they relied on a government who would destroy Christianity if they had the chance. And what happened? As soon as the World War II ended, basically hostilities between the East and the West started. And the Great Iron Curtain came down, and everywhere that Russia put under its purview lost its freedom, and became a communist nation, and everywhere that the Western allies put their mark on became democratic republics.
The phrase Iron Curtain is frequently used in relation to the Cold War era. What exactly does this phrase mean, and why was it used? In 1946, during a speech to Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill used the phrase Iron Curtain to describe the divide between Western and Eastern Europe following the end of World War II.
From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent.
The nations of Eastern Europe were communist dictatorships with little personal freedom granted to their citizens. People were not allowed to travel freely, and it was often difficult to get accurate information in and out of these nations. The concept of the Iron Curtain was best defined by the rivalry between what came to be known as NATO and the Warsaw Pact states, which operated under Soviet influence. In 1949, the United States, along with the United Kingdom, France, Canada, and 8 other nations, signed a treaty creating the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO. The member nations agreed that an armed attack against any one of them would be viewed and treated as an armed attack against all of them. Therefore, the members pledged that if any one nation was attacked by the Soviet Union or another communist state, that the other member nations would retaliate in an appropriate manner. Several years later, in 1955, the Eastern European nations created the Warsaw Pact. Led by the Soviet Union, 8 communist nations, including East Germany, Poland, Romania, and several others, established a mutual defense treaty. Although the nations of NATO never fought an actual war against the Warsaw Pact nations, the feud between the rival factions persisted for 36 years in the form of the Cold War. The Warsaw Pact officially disbanded in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Now we come to the world of today, which basically people are going either towards democracies or capitalist societies or totalitarian. So now we can see in the current conflict that Russia is still doing naval exercises with Iran, who seem to be running out of missiles at the first attack of the United States and Israel, now has these very sophisticated missiles that can break into clusters or even change direction mid-air and basically evade the Iron Dome or the air defense system that Israel has in place. In a minute, I will show you the areas of Israel that have been bombed and some places even almost completely destroyed, which they are keeping a very, very tight lid on it. But the information is starting to leak out, the videos and the pictures. Now, we're still in Nahum 2, and when you get to verse 7, this is the part that has not been fulfilled yet. Now, we know from prophecy that Nineveh is the United States and Assyria is the allies, right? Those that have allied themselves, the Protestant nations. Verse number 7 says, "And Huzzab shall be led away captive. She shall be brought up, and her maids shall lead her as the voice of doves tabering upon their breasts." Now, I looked up Huzzab just to see what it was about, and it said Huzzab represented a queen. So it could be, we don't know if there is some type of attack because the United States is prophesied to lose this war. Verse 8 talks specifically about the United States, and the code word for that is Nineveh.
The gates of the rivers nevertheless shall be opened, and the Assyrian's palace shall be dissolved. And Huzab of Assyria shall be led away captive, she shall be brought up, and her maids, nations under her rule, shall lead her as with the voice of doves, tabering upon their breasts. But Nineveh, the capital city, is of old like a pool of water, yet they, her citizens, shall flee away. Stand, stand, shall they cry, but none shall look back. Unlike flowing or undulating waters, water in a pool stands still, but in this instance, the waters, peoples, in the capital city of the present-day Assyrians, contrary to all expectations and their fighting tradition, flee away, and even when they hear the command to stand, they shall be so anxious to get out of the way of him that dasheth in pieces, that they shall not dare look back. Hence, to him that dasheth in pieces, the command is, Take ye the spoil of silver, take the spoil of gold, for there is none end of the store and glory out of all the pleasant furniture. Nahum 2:9. Subsequent to giving this command to despoil Assyria, the Lord turns to the bloody city and pronounces upon her the resulting doom. Verses 10 to 13. She is empty and void and waste, and the heart melteth, and the knees smite together, and much pain is in all loins, and the faces of them all gather blackness. Where is the dwelling of the lions, the king's palaces, and the feeding place of the young lions, the dominion of his princes, where the lion, even the old lion, the head king, walked, and the lion's whelp, the king's son, and none made them afraid. The lion did tear in pieces enough for his whelps, and strangled for his lionesses, queens, and filled his holes with prey, and his dens, treasuries, with raven riches.
If you go to chapter 3, it's more of judgments and condemnation that is coming upon Assyria and Nineveh. And again, Nineveh was the capital city of Assyria. Now, I had to go through that because when we go back to the PowerPoint, this person is Paula White. And it is my suspicion, although I'm not sure, that she may be a wicked counselor. And there's a reason why I feel this way. Again, this is not authoritative teaching. This is just me observing things as they're happening. And we're going back to Nahum 1. We proved that Nahum 1, 2, and 3 is about a latter-day war, a war where modern technology is being used, where the chariots jostle each other in the broad ways, where they seem like lightnings. That is a war with the modern plane, modern vehicles that can move really at a really fast speed. It says, there is one come out of thee that imagineth evil against the Lord, a wicked counselor. If someone imagines evil against the Lord, they cannot do anything to the Lord himself, right? He's up in heaven above. They can't touch him. It has to be that they're imagining evil against God's people. This person right here has been appointed as Trump's personal spiritual advisor. Now, she is on video, and we have it in one of our videos, where she is a constant advocate to start World War III at Jerusalem. She was the one who told President Trump that he was certain to win a war at Jerusalem because it was biblical and spiritual. She said this to Trump. She said this to his cabinet, and she also is on record saying this to Netanyahu.
We as Christians and believers know this, that we're not only to stand with Israel because we stand with God, and Israel is God's place.
She believes backing Israel is a biblical mandate, has posed for pictures at the Western Wall, and met with Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu for an interview. She's even bragged about advising Trump to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
80-something nations called saying, you're going to start World War III, and he looked at me, Paulo, what's the final weigh-in of people with faith? And I said, absolutely do it. It's right, both with history, it's right with God. 80-something nations called saying, you're going to start World War III. And he looked at me, Paulo, what's the final weigh-in of people with faith? And I said, absolutely do it. It's right, both with history, it's right with God.
She also has a seat on the Religious Liberty Commission. This is a committee that President Trump put together to make sure that no one discriminates against Christianity in the United States. It's part of his agenda to establish the United States as a Christian state, okay? And he wants to end the separation between church and state. That means the Christian church. We're not talking about other churches. He wants to end the separation between the Christian church and the government. So now we have a wide variety of evangelical leaders that are on the White House campus at any given time and consulting President Trump. But the one who has the most power is Paula White. Now, the talk of it is that Netanyahu was actually killed. We got reports of this from non-American news that he was actually killed in the airstrike with his brother as they bombed his whole compound that has to do with his house. And he meets with his military officials there sometimes. They bombed the whole thing. And Netanyahu, it's under contention or if he's actually dead or not. And what we're seeing is actually just AI when we see him give talks now.
מה שאלת אותי?
ראש הממשלה אומרים ברשת שאתה בכלל מת?
אני מת על קפה, אתה יודע מה? אני מת על העם שלי. איך הם מתנהגים, פנטסטי. אתה רוצה לספור את מספר אצבעות?
אתה יכול להראות לנו?
פה. ראית?
יפה מאוד.
לחיים.
People have been making a strong case for that as they have pointed out inconsistencies in the videos and weird and wonky things that are happening with his hands, with his fingers, with his ears, with the cup of coffee he holds. It just looks really fake. So we think that those of us who are keeping up with it, we think that eventually they are going to admit that Netanyahu did in fact die. Now here is what allegedly happened the night Netanyahu's compound was bombed. First thing of note is that Hesketh, Trump's defense minister, had planned a special envoy to the state of Israel after the missile strike on Netanyahu's compound/bunker, which resulted in the deaths of his brother and another senior Israeli military official. This special envoy was immediately canceled. Then Netanyahu's Wings of Zion, his special airplane, much like US presidents have Air Force One, went up into the air at 12:40 p.m. and circled right by the Israeli coastline for 4 hours. Netanyahu was said to be in a coma and being worked on by a medical team on the plane during this time. They went to Greece, Italy, and Austria and attempted to land for emergency medical services, but were rejected. This could be from fear of Iranian retaliation. Finally, Germany allowed the Wings of Zion to land. It is said that Netanyahu died of his injuries in Berlin. Of course, German and Israeli officials have denied this, but flight records and trackers have shown that the plan did take this bizarre route on the day of the bombing. And verified sources have said the Wings of Zion had this flight path and was indeed parked in Berlin at the specified time.
No kidding. Watch his hand. So he's got 5 fingers, and then they just disappear. Now he's just got 3 fingers. Where's his other finger? I know where it's going. Let's watch. Where does his finger just disappears? It's going up his wrist so he can steal his watch because somebody's got to pay for this war. And here's the part with his head, his shapeshifter head. Watch his head shift.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's not the same guy. Even Grok, what was the actual context of this conversation between Mike Huckabee and Netanyahu? This is a satirical AI-generated content. Just like that, Grok is going to tell you the truth. There you go. And then he tries to, Ambassador Huckabee goes, sorry, Grok, you blew it. It was very much real meeting no, it wasn't. Another deep fake, another pretend that Benjamin Netanyahu isn't dead. Another pretend. Here it is. So he puts himself in a room with military advisors, but the room looks like virtual production. The room is filmed with people sitting in their seats and one empty seat in the middle. Consequently, Netanyahu, or the AI version of Netanyahu, is superimposed digitally on the room. There's no reaction in the faces of the people in the room who are really there to anything Netanyahu says. No reaction. Also, the lighting is different on the skin of the people in the room compared to this lighting on Netanyahu, who appears brighter than the rest of the people. In a paradoxical rerun of World War II, it appears that Netanyahu may be in an induced coma in a Berlin bunker, while Khomeini Jr. may be recovering in a Moscow hospital. So let's watch it. Here's the video. You can tell.
I'm here with Israel's defense minister, our chief of staff, the head of the Mossad, the chief of Air Force, our senior commanders. In the past 24 hours, we knocked out 2 of the terrorist chieftains, the top terrorist chieftains of this tyranny. Our aircraft are hitting the terror operatives on the ground, in the crossroads, in the city squares. This is meant to enable the brave people of Iran to celebrate the Festival of Fire. So celebrate and Happy Nowruz. We're watching from above.
So that was a fake video, and this guy gives a great breakdown on it. It's just from Upscrolled, Mohams. He's got a great breakdown.
Take a look at those vents on their tables. Pay close attention. You able to spot the differences?
They're not the same.
Let's go back real quick. Here are the vents in front of Netanyahu versus the other vents across the rest of the tables.
How different they look?
It's a completely different vent, and the wood panel color is completely different. Here's another angle that makes it even more obvious. This whole area actually makes no sense, considering there's an unnatural crack in the middle of the Netanyahu vent panels, as if they're cabinets, when that's not what they are. And then here's a regular phone versus whatever the hell this is in front of Netanyahu. And then there's the fact that no one is even looking at or acknowledging Netanyahu while he's speaking. And the fact that Netanyahu's face is abnormally brighter than the rest of the people in that dark-ass room they're in. And then there's the chairs, where everyone's leather chair has a distinct curve at the top, but not Netanyahu. His leather chair is straight at the top. But who knows? Maybe he gets a special chair. And lastly, let's zoom in on that hand to see if he can magically make his ring disappear again.
He does.
Well, there you have it.
No ring.
No ring right here.
But wait.
And then just a few seconds later, poof,
boom.
There's the ring again. Anyways, Israel's desperation is palpable. Here's a message to Netanyahu, alive or dead. How about you take that flight over to the U.S. to give that fat Cheeto of yours some loving, and for some outside journalist to verify your existence? Because from where we're looking, it's looking like you're screaming from 6 feet under.
Iranians struck the home of Benjamin Netanyahu. Last night, the Iranians struck the home of Benjamin Netanyahu. They killed his brother. They struck the home of Ben Gvir. He is seriously wounded, may not survive. Iran is going to start to take out the totality of Israel's leadership. This is the reality of this conflict. Israel played the regime change game. It's going to be the Israelis that are going to be paying the highest price. The Iranians are no longer wearing kid gloves. They've taken them off, and they're coming in bare knuckles.
Attributes of the wicked counselor. What will qualify a person for being a wicked counselor is that eventually they will move against the people of God, which has not happened yet. Okay? Right now, we have not been disclosed to view. That's something that we know is one of the markers that lets us know that Ezekiel 9 is about to happen. Once we start going through Jacob's time of trouble, that's when we know Ezekiel 9 is right around the corner. So next, we need to establish what the scriptures say about the territory where the war will take place, and that is the Holy Land. In Zephaniah 2, we know very well, it talks about a nation that is not desired, that is gathering itself together in verse 1. In past studies, we identified this nation as the Zionist nation, the state of Israel. God addresses them as a nation and says his decree in fierce anger will one day come upon them. Now, if we skip to verses 4 through 6 of Zephaniah chapter 2, we can see what the prophet says about the war and what will happen there. Let's read it.
For Gaza shall be forsaken, and Ashkelon a desolation. They shall drive out Ashdod at the noonday, and Ekron shall be rooted up. Woe unto the inhabitants of the sea coast, the nation of the Cherethites. The word of the Lord is against you, O Canaan, the land of the Philistines. I will even destroy thee, that there shall be no inhabitant. And the sea coast shall be dwellings and cottages for shepherds, and folds for flocks.
Now we will endeavor to pinpoint where the current destruction is taking place in this war. As of March 20, 2026, Iran has launched extensive ballistic missile and drone attacks, targeting multiple Israeli cities and regions during this ongoing conflict. The most heavily targeted area in the Tel Aviv metropolitan region, including Ramat Gan, Tel Aviv, and surrounding areas, alongside major strikes in central Israel to include Beth Shemesh and the southern region, Beersheba and Eilat, and the north. That you're seeing right now is a live feed that I took a screenshot of that the news channel Al Jazeera has as a resource on their website. And this shows the sites that have been impacted or bombed in Israel by Iran. So the green dots that you see here, let me go ahead and point it out. The green dots, if you look up here, you can see the key to this map. The green dots are where the Iranian forces have hit. So right here, you can see the border of Israel. Now I've covered the Gaza region in red because that is already decimated. It's already destroyed, as it says in verse 4. Okay, and now here are all the active places you can see that Iran has struck within the territory of the state of Israel. Okay, now they've bombed more than that, okay, because like I said, this has changed to a regional war. So Iran's bombing is represented by the green dots, and that's what we are primarily concerned with, because that tells us how much prophecy has been fulfilled. Now, I'm going to impose a map that shows the cities in Israel on top, so you can get a picture of how many cities or region in Israel have been bombed. I have Gaza shaded in red, as I said, as the world well knows that Gaza has been totally decimated and forsaken. So that was the first coastal city to get pummeled during this conflict. Okay, but what's coming up next? I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this. The scripture says that Ashkelon, Ashdod, and Ekron and the coastal cities are going to be decimated. And as you can see, Israel has had considerable bombing in the Tel Aviv region. Now, Israel actually is broken up into districts, okay? They have, number one is the northern district, which is up here. They have the Haifa district, which is right here on the coast. Number three, they have the central district, which is right in here. Number four, they have the Tel Aviv district, which is right here. Number five, they have the Jerusalem district, which is right here. And number six, this is the largest, they have the southern district. So we need to understand that Iran is hitting the coast very, very hard. Haifa is a oil refinery city. I mean, it's not just that, but that's they're targeting areas that have large populations. Okay. And the Tel Aviv district is one of the most populated regions. And also it is where the leadership, the military leadership and the political leadership are mainly in this region right here. So between districts 3, 4, and 5, you can see that the greater concentration of Iraq's bombing has happened in this region, and it's all really along the coast. Now, Ekron is no longer called Ekron, and I'll have to show you where Ekron actually is. Okay, so here now we can see a different map, and it has where ancient Ekron was. And as you can see, there's a lot of bombing that's concentrated in this area. There's a green dot right here and green dots all in the area. And then we do have some green dots here in the southern district as well. This is the thing. Now that Israel has opened an additional front of the war and trying to target Hezbollah and going into this region right here, Hezbollah is also firing missiles as well. They're starting to fire missiles, and Hezbollah has gotten mainly in central Israel, which is this region right here. But Hezbollah has also been able to get the southern district and the northern district. Okay, so now Israel is getting missiles from the north and also from Iran, which we know is to the east, past Jordan and Syria. Let's think about this, because the scriptures say that when these cities start to get decimated, you can see there's been activity near the coast, near Ashdod. Ashkelon has not been hit really directly yet, but if we look at the scripture, we know that Ashkelon will become a desolation. They're going to drive out Ashdod at the noonday, and Ekron shall be rooted up. Now, is this talking about bombing? We don't know. We are getting word by keeping abreast of all the news, and when we keep abreast of the news, I'm saying that we watch news from all over the world, and I keep up with it, and I watch it basically every single day, and I check multiple news sources because I don't want to report something that's wrong. There's a lot of fake stuff that's out there right now, but we have to look and see which parts of scripture are coming true. And when we look at this, we can see that Israel is getting much more than they bargained for, and they have never been hit this hard. They have never been hit this hard. We have heard reports that Israel is handing out sentences of up to 2 years to anyone who has a video of damaged sites of the bombing. We've heard that Tel Aviv looks like Gaza now, but anybody who releases that to the media can face up to 2 years in jail. Israel has been reported to be one of the strongest surveillance states in the world. And that's basically why what they want to bring to the United States, and why they're working so hard to get, ownership of the social media that we learn, and to get into our phones and stuff, because Israel does not have a truly free society. In fact, their parliament just put up a bill to ban the teaching of Christianity in the country, and you can face up to 2 years in jail just for teaching the gospel of Christ. But strangely enough, we have politicians that are telling us now that if we reject Judaism and we don't support Israel, that we are going against God. And I am about to come out with the video about this as well. It is absolute heresy what some of these conservative Republicans are saying. They have made it to where saying the phrase Christ is King is actually anti-Semitic. You don't believe me? Just watch the video that comes out, because they're not hiding it. They say it on video, on record.
Christ is King is why do you say that?
Because you see the people who are saying it, and they're saying it in that context. They're saying Jews are horrible, like they're attacking Jews, and they end with Christ as King, to make it sound like somehow there's a biblical basis for attacking Jews. Look, Jesus was a Jew. And by the way, the twisted theology that says Jews are Christ killers, and that's been used to justify anti-Semitism, to justify persecution and murder. Look, as I read the Gospels, Jesus went to the cross willingly. He made the choice to go to the cross, and it was not the Jews. It is being used online in a way that is meant to say, screw you, Jew. It is being used in a context very directly to say, I hate Jews, and that's almost an online code word. Christ is King is, I hate the Jews.
Is that your view, or why do you say that?
Because you see the people who are saying it, and they're saying it in that context. They're saying Jews are horrible, like they're attacking Jews, and they end with Christ as King to make it.
They are saying if you teach about Christ in a bold and forward way, that is anti-Semitic, and that Christians must respect Judaism first and foremost because Christianity came from Judaism. They forget to mention the fact that if Judaism had its way, Christianity would never exist. So we have had the Tel Aviv metropolitan area, Ramat Gan, Beth Shemesh, Beersheba, Eilat, Jerusalem area has gotten damaged. Iran said that they're going to start destroying their sacred sites and also the heritage sites over there. So they've had some damage near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Azor, the city of Azor, is reporting damage from a cluster bomb. Uhud is suffering damage from submunitions. Northern Israel is targeted frequently, roughly 22% of attacks. Again, that's right by where Hezbollah is in Lebanon. They opened that front in Lebanon to target Hezbollah. And then also all of the IDF bases. Specific targets include the Palamikim Air Base and the Ovada Air Base. So the situation is rapidly evolving. Now I want to move to the border peace and where that initial meeting was held. Because remember, we are living in between the verses Daniel 11:44. If you go to 11:44, that is about Great Britain. Tidings out of the east and north shall trouble him, and he shall go with great fury to destroy and take away many. That's what happened when Great Britain heard the news of Germany taking Europe by storm, and then Japan coming out of the east. Great Britain went out, and it was like basically the last stand for Europe. When we move to verse 45, that's when a new king of the north comes into position. And it says, and he shall plant the tabernacles of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end, and none shall help him. Now, when Trump basically started forming this border peace, it was basically almost the same time as when he and other economic and world leaders came up with the 20-point peace plan, which happened after the Midnight campaign, the first one that the US and Israel did to rid Iran of its nuclear weapons. So Trump came up with the 20-point peace plan, and he had help from former Prime Minister Tony Blair. They came up with this peace plan, and they got other Arab leaders to come in and back it. And their whole thing was they're going to rebuild Gaza and make it into a really nice place. And it's going to be peace, and there's going to be international oversight. So they made this coalition, which I mentioned has all these different countries. And every country was to put their money into it to bring peace to that region. Again, when we're talking about this war, they wanted to bring peace to the war that was already in the Holy Land, which was between the Palestinians and the state of Israel, Hamas and Israel. So this coalition was put together to win the war. We know that this coalition would be formed to win the war, that they would have greater numbers, but guess what? They're still going to lose. Now, Turkey is part of this coalition. I want to say that Daniel in the Revelation, who teaches that Turkey is the last king of the north, that's the teaching of Uriah Smith. It cannot be so. During this 20-point peace plan, Israel came out with a strong statement that although they will allow other Arab countries to have their patrols in their land, Israel omitted Turkey and said by no means will they step foot in their territory. So Turkey would not be able to plant anything in that region because Israel made that part of the document. Thereby, the doctrine that Turkey is the last king of the north, it really falls flat. And so we do see that the United States has come up in the scene and they are ruling that area by proxy, okay? And they are, in fact, the last king of the north. So where did this border peace, where did the inception of it take place? The inception of it happened at the World Peace Summit at Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. And that, my friends, is on the Sinai Peninsula. That's where the meeting took place. Now we need to go to some statements that were written on the King of the North. We need to understand this. In 1947, the prophet wrote, "As to his planting his tabernacles in the glorious holy mountain, it is not too clear, for planting the tabernacles of his palace before he comes to his end does not necessarily mean moving his throne there. It could be taken to mean having a branch of his palace there. If he is to plant his tabernacles there while Michael stands up, though, then the only other locality other than the Holy Land that we know of is at Mount Sinai between the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. So the two seas that we're talking about in Daniel 11, for those of you who haven't been on our studies, is the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. From the study of the 11th chapter of Daniel, we have learned several positive truths. 1, that the time of the end began in the 18th century. 2, that the king of the south is the Ottoman Empire. 3, that the king of the north at the present time is Great Britain, and this was written in 1947, which is directly after World War II. 4, that World War II is the war in Daniel 11. And now that the prophecy of the 11th chapter of Daniel continues with the 12th, through the 12th, we shall turn to Daniel 12, verse 1. Daniel 12, verse 1 says, "And at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which standeth for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, everyone who shall be found written in the book." Now, this is about the first gathering, the gathering of those in God's church. There will be another opportunity for people to come into the truth later. Not everybody has to be so-called ready at this point. But those of us who have been in the church for a long time, been long-standing members, we're going to fall under this time. And if you notice that we are delivered right at the time Michael stands up, and then there happens to be a time of trouble that comes into play right at that time. Okay, but we're being delivered right at that time. So that denotes that our trouble is happening beforehand, and it's actually called Jacob's time of trouble. Let's continue reading. At that time, that is, at the time the king of the north comes to his end, and none shall help him, shall Michael stand. And at that same time there shall be a trouble such as never was, even to that very time. Only God's people who have their names written in the book will be delivered, none other. This study has led us step by step down to our day. Through this study, we see that the time of trouble is but a step in the future, that the only event yet to be fulfilled before the trouble begins is the King of the North coming to his end. Then follows the reward of the faithful. So this is also in scripture. I don't want you to take my word for it. Isaiah 31 talks about the fall of these allied forces, the ones who will be folded together, okay, for protection. They'll be allied up. There'll be a coalition of nations. And I want to say that that list that I showed you about those who have joined the Board of Peace, it is something that is changing because some on that list are very upset with President Trump and with with Netanyahu in the state of Israel for starting this war with Iran. They joined under the impression that this would stabilize the Middle East region. That's what they want. They want development, prosperity. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Turkey, all these places benefit from there being a stable Middle East. But understand that Israel doesn't have that doctrine. That's not the doctrine that they're leading with. What they're leading with is the doctrine of decimating our enemies and clearing the land so we can be from the Nile River to the Euphrates River. We can have that territory that was originally promised to Abraham. And that's what they're laying claim to. And that's what they're not saying openly, but they have still said it behind closed doors. And it is now understood by the world because of the social media and the freedom of how information is flowing, that it is Israel's intent to run out anyone who is in those territories eventually. And so that's why as soon as they could, they opened that front in Lebanon, and they will continue to fight in Syria and wherever else, in Jordan, so they can gain more and more territory. They will occupy the West Bank, even though that was forbidden in the 20-point peace plan. As soon as that 20-point peace plan was signed, the ink wasn't even dry. Israel's parliament voted to occupy the West Bank. And so they are not coming from a doctrine of peace and working together with other nations for stability. They are really just about straight up dominance and expanding their borders. It's kind of like a manifest destiny attitude. Let's read Isaiah 31:8 because it's going to tell us how Assyria, the United States and Assyria, are going to fall, even though they're going to be allied up for strength. It says, "Then shall the Assyrian fall with the sword, not of a mighty man, and the sword, not of a mean man, shall devour him. But he shall flee from the sword, and his young men shall be discomfited." I want to point out something to you because people are saying that this is not the war, okay? And they're saying, well, we haven't seen everything happen in Zechariah 14. That's true. We have not seen every nation gather against Jerusalem. But understand that we are seeing that the United States is preparing to send ground troops, and so is Israel. And in fact, Israel has sent some ground troops into Lebanon, and ground troops have gone into Iran, who are allied with the United States and Israel, from, I think, the Kurdish force in, I want to say it's Syria, East Syria. So there has been the start of a ground invasion into Iran, and the United States has mobilized 2,500 Marines and 2,000 Air Force or Army. And then he was supposed to send another 2,500 that he's sending to the Middle East. So the Marines are like the best of the best, basically, as far as they're an elite fighting force. They're considered the toughest in the armed forces. They're a subset of the Navy. So they come in there on boats and stuff, and they're really, really tough. It's really tough to become a Marine. Okay, you have to be like rock hard and be able to withstand a lot of stuff. So we're sending about 5,000 troops that are Marines over there, and then we have over 2,000 that are going in. So Trump's promise that there will be no never wars or wars in the Middle East that are forever wars is basically he's falling back on his word, and we don't know how long this conflict will be and how long America will be in it and how long it will take for us to get to the point where every nation gathers and there's like a ground invasion that takes place in Jerusalem or against Jerusalem. From the look of this verse, Isaiah 31:8, it says they should flee for the sword and his young men shall be discomfited. It doesn't seem like the troops will stay in the United States. It seems like troops will be in that region and they flee, and then when they're discomfited, that means they're defeated. But the Bible says they're not going to be necessarily defeated by the enemy, okay? By Iran or whoever comes to Iran's aid. We know that Iran did not have the capabilities that it had during the first part of the conflict, and that they must be being supplied by China and Russia with the sophisticated missiles they have. So it says the Assyrian will fall by a sword, which God himself will send. Assyria will not fall by a mean man. His fall will come under circumstances that will clearly show that God caused it to happen. When ancient Israel fell, it was God who brought it. It was God who was responsible for it. So it will be with Assyria, unless she too turns to God. Moreover, it is a vain thing for them to look to some other nation for help. None can stay God's punishment. Only God can help at such a time. Isaiah 31:9 says, and he shall pass over his stronghold for fear, and his princes shall be afraid of the ensign, saith the Lord, whose fire is in Zion, and his furnace in Jerusalem. So this denotes that there is going to be some fear, and at the time when Assyria is being crushed, Ezekiel 9 is happening, and then immediately after that, the kingdom is being established. Let's read what the commentary is on those verses. At the time, God's purifying fire is in Zion, and his purifying furnace is in Jerusalem. The Assyrian will pass over to his stronghold for fear, and his princes shall be afraid of the ensign. From this, we can see that Nineveh will not lose out completely when she loses in Palestine. So understand, when I say Palestine, this was written in the 1940s. And so Palestine was actually the region that the state of Israel occupies. It is not that small Gaza Strip. It was actually the whole territory. She is to lose out in Palestine first and then flee to her stronghold. This has reference to the time when the kingdom is set up before the scarlet-colored beast come, before the woman rules the beast. Indeed, this prophecy is talking about Assyria, not Babylon. It shows that Assyria will lose out in the promised land before she loses her stronghold. The kingdom then is to be established before the complete fall of Assyria takes place. The kingdom is going to be established, moreover, in Zion and in Jerusalem, not in Washington or Mount Carmel. And many peoples and nations shall flow unto it. It will happen just as soon as every man casts away his idols. It is useless to expect it before. As soon as that happens, Assyria will fall in the land. The coming of the kingdom then is not waiting for anyone but God's own people. I'm going to switch between two different timelines because they basically show different things and give details, it coming from a different perspective, basically. This one right here is showing the perspective of the two-horned beast in Revelation 13. It appears starting with verse 14. It shows its two different phases. The first phase is going to be right here. This is the time that we're living in. Let me go ahead and get my laser pointer. You see this little dividing line, okay? And this is what's actually happening right now that we can kind of see. It says the leopard-like beast, the present world. We don't know when this time period is going to end, because actually this beast, like I said, it started in the papal period. It shows the Protestant Reformation, but it extends all the way till today, because we know that its deadly wound has to be healed and all the world wonders after the beast. And who brings that about? That's the two-horned beast right here. And from the statements that we read, we know that it's going to be a localized confederacy first. That is the time of Isaiah 8 that we're looking at. Now, there is no Sunday law that's a test for the church. There's no Sunday law that is a test for the Church of God. It's only a bluff. What is going to be the test is the Confederacy, and eventually there will be a death decree. We know this because Ellen White talked about it. She said she saw papers being written after a certain time, people could be put to death. But also because of those scriptures in Revelation, which talk about a time where men shall seek death and they won't find it, meaning that you're going to have to have that great faith to reject the Confederacy. And what we're going to see is a large class of brethren in the church that are going to be for the Confederacy. Now, how are these things going to escalate? Okay, how are the brethren in the church going to get to this point? As I mentioned before, I would almost say expect an attack on American soil, seeing how the Bible describes the defeat of Assyria and Nineveh in prophecy, and also in Zephaniah 2. It seems like there is a high possibility of that happening. Now, after 9/11 happened, that gave rise to the Patriot Act and basically more of a surveillance state coming into law into America, and also gave rise to our endless wars in the Middle East. And it was on the pretext that we were under threat from Islamic extremists or terrorists. And so if we see another event like that happen, and this war, might I add, is very unpopular, even within MAGA. Okay, that's Trump's core hard loyalist group. Okay, MAGA is now split. There are a lot of people that are against this war in MAGA. They are against the Zionist, what they perceive as the Zionist agenda, and they are against the support of Israel in all these wars in the Middle East. So now President Trump is having a large portion of his base that is splitting away from him and calling foul and saying that he deceived us, he betrayed us. He even has people in his own cabinet that are basically resigning and going public with their disagreement over this issue. They are very, very upset about the Iran war. And then you have the left. You have the people who are left and who are moderates and who basically are very unhappy with what is going on and how the United States has been dismantled. They're very unhappy with how the Constitution, the highest law of the land, is being decimated by the current administration, is being tested, disregarded, and we're having no low number of lawsuits that are going against the Trump administration that are battling it out in court. because he has violated the Constitution, or his administration has, with some type of policy or decree or executive order. So an attack on American soil would be something that would change the tide of the American people. We know that crowds are very emotional, very fickle. They can be moved by these acts of terror or things that happen in war, and it can galvanize people and help them come together and have unity. And so what we think is that is what is going to turn everything on its face. And then that is the time that the people of God are going to discover themselves at the tip of the sword. That's when the trouble is going to start, because the pressure to join this confederacy and to become a fully unified Christian religious state, they're going to put out a demand of loyalty to organizations, to churches, and to individuals that, hey, you need to be on board with this. The Confederacy is already here. We know this, and that's according to what we know in the symbolic codes. We know that it was going to be formed before the war, which it was, but we have to realize that it will morph and develop and become stronger and stronger until it becomes a trouble for us. And everything doesn't happen at the same time. It's like when people say, oh, this is not it, they expect everything to happen at the highest level, at the apex from the very beginning. And it just doesn't happen like that. History shows it doesn't happen like that. We're right here where we've had the church and state affiliates. They've come together. They were organized before the election of Trump, the second term. They wrote the plan to dismantle the government. On day one of Trump's presidency, they began to dismantle the U.S. government and put in executive orders, which are decrees for a religious state. And that was the United States speaking as a dragon. It's starting to speak through its laws. We do have those who are being wicked counselors to the United States, to the president and his cabinet. We have Pastor Paula White, who is Trump's #1 spiritual advisor, who advised him to go into this war. And he felt like he had the backing of God and all of the churches and evangelicals. And that's why Trump did it, because he told him that this was right and this war is holy and he would have victory. And Trump will say he's not the strongest Christian. He says he doesn't even know if he's going to heaven, but he's just listening to the evangelicals and to the churches who basically wrote the plan for him. And mind you, the Catholics were in that too. They were in that Project 2025 deep. And also the conservative justices are also giving Trump many a win and many a victory in violating the Constitution and dismantling the government. So in the United States, there's just like a lot of turmoil and there's not a lot of togetherness between political parties. So it's going to take an event of epic proportions to bring everyone together. And that's my best guess, that it is going to basically be an attack on American soil or a huge terrorist event. Right here, we see the rise of a dictatorship, which the Constitution is going to be strapped. Now, is this dictator going to be Trump? I would honestly say that I don't know, because if the United States does as it's supposed to, which is lose the war, and if there is an attack on American soil, on the White House or whatever, and that is destroyed, it could be that, as we read, as the old lion and the lion's whelp, there, the Nahum 2 was saying, where are they? It could be that, our leadership could be taken out like Iran's leadership was taken out. We don't know. We've heard reports that Netanyahu has been taken out, and they're taking out Israel's leadership and military heads. We know that's happening. The assassination of heads of state, like all is on the table. So there could be a second man who rises in the absence of Trump. And that would be our second man, 666. But in between this time, and let me go to the next timeline, there's a transition period in which Michael stands up and the kingdom is established. So what we were looking at was in more detail, the Isaiah 8 Confederacy. Here's the gigantic war. Our trouble starts sometime during this war. It says the present trouble in Laodicea is therefore to spread into Babylon and develop into the time of trouble such as never was. A development which shows the same satanic power now working in Laodicea will soon fully manifest itself in consolidation with the beast within the churches in Babylon, there to oppose the marking of the second fruits, as it is now in Laodicea opposing the sealing of the first fruits. So here we see that we're in this time period here. The war is started. It's just a matter of an event happening, a dire event that is going to bring this church-state confederacy in the U.S. to put the pressure on the Adventist church to join this confederacy, and we will have a split in the church. That split is going to be between the Esaites and the Jacobites. And those who are for the confederacy will be snared, and that's the last straw for them. They are taken in the slaughter of Ezekiel 9, which is the rapturing of the wicked from the church, the antitypical Passover before we are taken into the kingdom. So Assyria is crushed. Ezekiel 9 happens at that very time. Michael stands up. So at that time, the 144,000 and those who are sealed with him in the church, the 144,000 are disclosed to view as the new leaders of the Adventist church. We are not going to have everyone that you see in ministry now as part of the 144,000. Those are ministers that have gone to school and that have decided to become ministers. With all due respect, my grandfather was an Adventist minister. I know all about being in that group, you know, the ministry class in the Adventist church. I grew up in it, but you can be a minister if you go to school and you get that degree. What I'm trying to say is the ministers of the last days that will be part of the 144,000 are going to be of a different order. It's going to be of God's order, a royal priesthood, and they also call them governors because they will be leaders in an actual kingdom that is established. A kingdom has a territory and it has a people and it has a leadership, right? So the very next thing that we are going to see is whether the United States, their allies, are going to be crushed, and how every nation is going to be drawn in, and then also look for a event that will bring pressure on the American church where the headquarters is for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Look for that event, and it can happen tomorrow. That's what I'm trying to say. Our time of trouble could start tomorrow, and life could change as we know it. Because if laws are changed rapidly, if we go into martial law, if elections stop, if we become a police state, you have to be ready to basically die for your beliefs. That's why it says men will seek death. You have to have that type of faith. And I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm just trying to help you to understand what has to happen to those who are living on the earth in these last days. If God has selected you to live during this time, that means that God sees you as someone who is strong enough to stand. I used to be so scared when I used to read about the time of trouble. I used to be like, man, you know, I hope I die before that time. Now, after going through a lot of life's trials, I realized that God had to take me out of that fearful stance and educate me in the school of Christ. And now it's not something that is fearful to me as it was back then. I know I'm here to live through it if God wills it. And so if he has you here for this time, understand that he's going to give you what you need to make it through. And the best thing that you can do to prepare for this is to be willing to go through the trials of life in the name of the Lord. Whether you're wicked, whether you're totally dedicated to the Lord, or whether you're not walking with the Lord, or you're totally walking with Satan, you will have trials and you will have trouble. But the difference is when you go through the trials and the troubles with the Lord at your side, you know, as someone that you go to in any situation, your faith grows to a point to where it is not as bad and the devil will flee. That's the point that we're trying to get to. When the devil knows that he cannot tempt you into sin by bringing trouble, he will flee. We have that promise in the scriptures, and he will trouble you no more.